resources for you guys. Take the day off of school. Just know that we see you, we love you, we hear you, and we stand with you. I wish I was kidding. I certainly feel more welcome in this room than I did testifying before Congress also. It is unfathomable to me that a 23-year-old, recent college graduate, college swimmer at that, has to go to DC to sit in front of our members of Congress, again, the beating heart of the American Republic, and explain to them that men and women are different. And then to be on the other side of that table and watch as they have these super confused looks on their faces. But I was there to testify and urging the Biden administration to halt with their illegal administrative rewrite of Title IX. And so I'm sitting there. Representative Lee, she's the ranking member of the subcommittee. She starts to read she's a Democrat from Pennsylvania, starts to read her opening monologue. The first words that come out of her mouth, she says, "I can't believe that I'm forced to sit here and listen to this transphobic bigotry." In this moment, truthfully, my heart broke. Honestly, I felt heartbroken, disheartened more than angry, more than frustrated. Because again, this is a sitting member of Congress, and she resorts to name-calling. Doesn't try to dissuade from my stance with facts, or logic, or reasoning, or lived experience, or common sense, or science, what happened to follow the science. But no, it instead starts calling me names. So it's my turn to read my testimony, and I conclude my testimony, and I didn't even mean to say this part, it just kind of came out of my mouth. I looked up at her and I said, Representative Lee, if my testimony makes me transphobic, then understand by your own logic, your opening monologue makes you a misogynist, which as you can imagine, sent the hearing into a tailspin. Marjorie Taylor Greene was also in that hearing, and so, yeah, because, anyways, she about 60 seconds later, Representative Lee, she raises her hand. I think after she had time to look up the word misogynist, because I literally thought she had about 60 seconds later, she raises her hand and she says, "I want her words removed from the record on the grounds of engaging in personalities," whatever that means. But this is where Marjorie Taylor Greene comes into play, because she buzzes in and she says, "I would call a man posing as a woman someone engaging in personalities." And then it's like a Jerry Springer show, and I'm like, oh gosh, what have I done? Like, people are about to start jumping over tables. Oh gosh. Anyways, let it be known that congressional record still stands, and she is in fact listed as a misogynist. But all of that to say, I could not be more excited to be in this room. So thank you guys, truly. A little bit about me. I graduated from University of Kentucky last year, where I got my degree in human health sciences and health law. And I had every intention upon graduating to go to dental school, to be a dentist. I had already accepted my seat. I put my deposit down. I had taken the DAT, which is this miserable 4-ish hour-long test to get into dental school, which, believe it or not, covers biology and chemistry and organic chemistry and math and science and reading, all the things. Scored in the top percentile. Could have gone anywhere that I wanted. Set to specialize in endodontics, crazily enough, which is essentially root canals. Never a position here that I imagined myself in. And being an athlete, you know, you set goals and you work to achieve those goals. And so I felt like I had to somehow justify God's calling, and how he was really straying me away from the plan that I had set for myself. And I justify his calling now by saying I'm still working on getting to the root of the problem coming out of people's lives. So it's kind of still like root canal, and honestly, probably just as painful as one. But a little bit about my swimming. I started swimming when I was 4, graduated when I was 22, so dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport. which parents in the room, former athletes in the room, you know what this is like. The time, the sacrifices that you have to make, the hours and the dedication. It's certainly not easy. It's impossible, really, to put into words. But I was willing to. I knew I had to do those things if I wanted to compete at the highest level and be successful at the highest level. So, flash forward to my junior year of college, pretty heavily recruited. Again, I really could have gone anywhere in the nation that I wanted to swim. I'm biased. The SEC is the best conference. I'm so sorry. You guys can just do like what Texas and Oklahoma and what every other school is doing and just join the SEC, apparently. But I knew I wanted to stay in the SEC. My dad's an SEC Hall of Famer. My mom played softball. My oldest sister played softball. She went to Ole Miss. My brother's in college playing football now. So I knew I wanted to stay in the SEC. I did not know I wanted to go to Kentucky. Admittedly, I thought the only things that came from Kentucky were meth and Mountain Dew, which I was interested in neither. I'm still interested in neither. But I on a whim, took an official visit there and I loved it. I loved the team. I loved the coaches. I loved the resources that they poured into us outside of even just athletics, into our academics and our service and our stewardship, all things that really mattered to me. So I ended up going there and really there could not have been a better place for me. I'll kind of flash forward. All I'll say about my first 2-ish years is I thought I worked hard before college. I was wrong. This was a different kind of working hard. We practiced 6 hours in the water every single day, with 3 of those hours being before 8 a.m. So you practice from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. You go to class, you come back, you practice again from 1:30 to 4:30. We ate our dinner at old people time of 4:45 because we were starving. Iced our shoulders, did your homework, went to bed, did it all again the next day. Swam 15,000 yards about every day, which is about 10 miles every single day. So was improving, getting better for sure. Flash forward to my junior year, which this was the year we dealt with all the COVID theatrics. I will be the first to say that being a college athlete during the time of COVID, really being a college student, I would argue being a human, I couldn't imagine being a Californian during the time of COVID. It was miserable, to say the least, in terms of the social distancing and the contact tracing and the mask mandates and the mandatory vaccines, which how many of you have ever seen a swimmer in the water wearing a mask? No, but they certainly tried. We essentially waterboarded ourselves every single day. So, but really, honestly, my junior year, this is where I learned to stand up for myself to authority figures, because I'd gotten COVID pretty early on, before all the vaccine stuff had come out. So I'd had COVID. I was voted team captain of my team. My coaches sit everyone down, the team down, and they say, hey, you know, the vaccines are mandatory if you want to compete. This didn't sit right with me. Not because I'm anti-vax or anything like that, but look, I'm young, I'm healthy. I'd already had COVID. I had the antibodies, which I thought was the best and the natural immunity. So I thought, no, I'm not doing that. Everyone else on the team did. People who knew it was, they didn't want to either, but it was a convenience thing. They told us if we didn't get it, we had to do mandatory testings. You had to keep wearing your mask. Your contact tracing, the time out of the water would be longer if you didn't have the vaccine. I still wasn't willing. But the same tactics, I say this to say, honestly, I really understood that mandatory didn't mean law or required, but the same tactics they used my junior year to force us into submission were the exact same tactics they used my senior year on a totally unrelated topic. But they pulled me aside and said, Riley, you're the captain of this team. You know, you're going to be hurting your team if you don't do this. And you don't want to hurt your team, do you? You know, Riley, you're supposed to be the leader and you're not leading. This isn't the example to be set. They even went as far to tell me, Riley, you know, we were going to our meet at University of Alabama. They said, you won't be able to travel if you don't get it. I said, knowing that I was my university's probably their best swimmer, I said, okay, No, I didn't get the vaccinated. Yes, I got to travel to the University of Alabama. Anyways, the first time I learned to stand up for myself, but I think that's important. Junior year. This was the first year I won an individual SEC title. This is when University of Kentucky won its first ever program title in history. And ultimately this year, I finished 7th in the country, which I was proud of. It wasn't my best swim, but you're top 8, you're an All-American, it's a pretty high honor. But I knew right then and there that I placed 7th in the nation, that my senior year, I had a goal of winning a national title, which would of course mean becoming the fastest woman in the country in my respective event. And so, senior year, about midway through, I'm right on pace to achieve this goal. I was ranked 3rd in the nation behind one amazing female swimmer who I knew very well because, like in most sports, your top tier athletes know of each other regardless of where you compete in the country. She's actually from Cal Berkeley, is where she swam. She's transferred to Florida, if that tells you guys anything. But I was trailing her by a few 100ths of a second. The swimmer leading the nation, by body length, might I add, was a swimmer that none of us had ever heard of before. Not myself, not my coaches, not my teammates. And this is the first time we became aware of a swimmer named Lia Thomas. Lots of red flags at the time. Keep in mind that we hadn't seen a photo of this person, or else things probably would have been a little more clear. But for all I knew at the time, this was a senior from University of Pennsylvania who was leading, which is not a school historically known for producing fast swimmers. And now I would argue is not a school historically known for producing anything good. So if you got your degree from there, return to sender. But from University of Pennsylvania, again, leading the nation by body lengths in events ranging from the 100 freestyle, which is of course a sprint event, and all of the freestyle events in between through the mile, which is long distance. And for those of you who might not necessarily understand swimming, think about this in terms of your Olympic runners, because that's like saying your best 200-meter runner is your best marathon runner. It doesn't happen. They're two totally different systems. That's what we were seeing in this person. So I'm scratching my head. I'm talking to my coaches. Who is this? We had no idea. We continued to stay in the dark until an article came out. And in this article, very briefly, in a blip of a sentence, as if really we were supposed to read right over it, it says, Leah Thomas is formerly Will Thomas and swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team. When I read this, of course I was shocked, naturally, but really upon reading it, it was kind of like, oh, makes sense. It's kind of like this sense of relief for me, because at this point I went to look up who Will Thomas was, because I was curious, was this a lateral movement? Was this someone who went from ranking amongst the best of the men to now continuing to rank amongst the best of the women? Which is, of course, not what we saw. We saw this was a mediocre man, and that's generous at best, ranking 462nd in the nation the year prior when competing against men, to now not only just #1 against the women, dominating the entire country of women. But that's why I say I felt relieved, because I thought that the NCAA would see it how I saw it, and how my family saw it, and how my coaches saw it, and how my teammates saw it, and how anyone with any amount of brain activity would probably comprehend this. Again, nothing hateful about it, nothing even opinionated about it. The sheer facts on the paper in front of us, this was not a lateral movement. Lo and behold, the NCAA did not see it that way. They saw absolutely nothing wrong with this, and so about 3 weeks before our national championships in March of 2022, they announced that Thomas's participation in the women's category was a non-negotiable. That's the verbiage they used, meaning there was nothing that we could do as female athletes. There was no questions that we could ask or concerns that we could raise. We were told that we had to accept this with a smile on our face. And so I got to personally witness and really feel the effect that this infringement, or what I would call an injustice, had on myself and my teammates and my competitors. And look, I don't claim to speak for every single girl on that pool deck, but I do claim to speak for the overwhelming majority of us. Because I can wholeheartedly attest to the tears that I saw, not just from the moms in the stands watching as their daughters are being obliterated in their sport that they once loved, but the tears from the girls who placed 9th and 17th and missed out on being named an All-American by 1 place. And I can wholeheartedly attest to the extreme discomfort in the locker room when you turn around and there's a 6'4", 22-year-old man who's fully intact with and exposing male genitalia, inches away from where you were simultaneously fully undressed. And I can wholeheartedly attest to the whispers, because that's absolutely what they were, was whispers of anger and frustration from these girls who, just like myself, worked our entire lives to get to this meet. And so that first day of competition was the 500 freestyle, which is not an event that I do. And so I watched on the side of the pool as Thomas swam to a national title, beating out Olympians, beating out American record holders. Keep in mind, these aren't scrubs. They're the most impressive female swimmers this world, not even just America, this world has ever seen. And he beat them all by body lengths. 1 second might not sound like a lot of time, but in the sport of swimming, the sport that's measured down to the 100th of a second, 1 second is significant. Thomas beat the entire nation of women by 2 seconds. Even his time last year would have beat every girl in the nation this past year by 2 seconds. He became the first man to win a Division I NCAA women's title. Trailblazer. Second day of competition was the 200 freestyle, which is the event that he and I raced in. And so we get on the blocks, dive off, we swim our 8 laps, I touch the wall at the end, I look up at the scoreboard, and almost impossibly enough, we had gone the exact same time down to the 100th of a second, meaning of course we had tied, which is incredibly embarrassing for a 6'4" man, might I add. But we had tied, which, you know, racing for 1 minute and 40 seconds and not even 1/100th separated us. You can't tell me that's not divine intervention. But anyways, we get out of the water, we go behind the awards podium. The NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself. Again, Thomas is towering over me. And he says, "Great job, you two, but you tied. And we only have 1 trophy. So we're gonna give the trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you don't get one." Well, that was the question I asked. And it's the question that no one dared ask all season. Why? Of course we asked it. We asked it in secrecy, behind closed doors, in our dorm rooms, hoping our roommates wouldn't hear us talking on the phone to the parents, when really they were on the other side of the door doing the exact same thing. But I asked just that. I said, "What do you mean you're gonna give the trophy to the man in the women's 200 freestyle? Isn't this everything that Title IX was passed to prevent from happening? Why? What is your rationale?" He didn't know. They didn't give him a script of what to say when someone asked why. And so he's stumbling on his words, and he's, we're just doing this in chronological order, is what he said. And so I said, "Okay, do you mean alphabetical? Because G comes before T. Otherwise, I literally have no idea what you're being chronological about. We tied." At this point, he realized that he didn't actually have a justification. But this is also when his face changed. His eyes changed, his voice sounded somber. I could tell he didn't even believe what he was about to say. But I appreciate his honesty, because he looked at me and he said, "Riley, I am so sorry, but we have been advised as an organization that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy's in Leah's hands. Again, you can pose with this one, but you have to give yours back. Leah takes the trophy home, you go home empty-handed, end of story." That is the moment when, because truthfully, all season, of course, all season, we knew what was happening was wrong. We knew the unfair competition was wrong. We knew the locker room was wrong. We knew the silencing that we were facing from our universities was wrong. But it wasn't until this official reduced everything we had worked our entire lives for down to a photo op to validate the feelings and the identity of a man at the expense of our own, that's when.
A thief.
I don't think up until this point, I wouldn't say I was cowering, because I don't know if I was scared. I don't think I was really scared to talk about it. Maybe that's what we can call it. But really what I thought was someone else would do something. I thought surely there would be a coach who said something. Surely there would be someone within the NCAA, someone with political power, some other swimmer, someone's dad, quite honestly, would come down there and yank this man out of our locker rooms. I just was I guess I had this notion that someone who was supposed to be protecting us would protect us. But I realized in that moment, what a naive thought. What a naive thought for me to think. Because if we waited for people to do the right thing unprovoked, we would be waiting for forever. And it hit me. How in the world could we as women, as female athletes, expect someone to stand up for us if we weren't even willing to stand up for us? This has to come from us as women, as female athletes. So that's ultimately when I made my mind up. On top of, again, the locker room aspect, which, if I had to see it, you guys at least have to hear about it. First of all, we were not forewarned that we would be sharing this changing space. No one told us that this was to be happening. The first time we became aware we would be undressing next to, again, this 6'4" man, fully exposing himself in all of his glory or lack thereof, was when we were inches away from this man, doing just the same, fully undressed. I can't even put into words the feeling of, look, like you have your back turned, all of a sudden you're undressing and you hear a man's voice. Of course, it's awkward, it's embarrassing, it's uncomfortable. It was inherent, innate for every girl in that changing space to cover themselves, whether it was with your towel, your suit, your hands, whatever you could, and to get out of there. But, I mean, really, I think the best way to describe this experience was, it was an utter violation. It felt like betrayal, and it was traumatic. And not even necessarily traumatic because of what we were forced to see or how we were forcibly exploited. It was traumatic for me to know just how easy it was for these officials, or whoever created these policies and implemented them, to totally dismiss our rights to privacy, without even a second thought, without even, again, bare minimum, forewarning us that this would be the arrangement. And again, on top of the silencing, which I mentioned, what they did during the time of COVID and how they, what I would call, emotionally blackmailed us into being coerced, to doing what they wanted us to do, or feeling how they wanted us to feel. But my senior year, it was that on steroids. We had to go to training, first of all, where they brought in an outside professional, whatever that means, who sat us down and taught us, me, a 21-year-old senior in college, how to use she, her pronouns. I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's no way I'm actually learning this. We had to go through this. It was like they would throw fake interview questions at us. We had to answer these interview questions to their standard. If we didn't, we had to re-go through the training. But not only did we have to learn how to use she, her pronouns, we had to learn he, him pronouns, because at the same national championships where we had Lia Thomas, right, a man, self-identifying as a woman, we were told we fully had to treat this person as a woman. At the same national championships, we had another athlete who was transitioning. But this athlete is a female who was then self-identifying as a man. And we were told we fully had to treat this person as a man. For optics purposes here, Izzy now goes by the name of Isaac, swims at Yale, which again begs the question of what's up with the Ivy Leagues. You guys are getting lectured by a blonde from Kentucky. There's a joke in there somewhere. Izzy, now Isaac, swimming at Yale. Optics here. Again, to put you in my shoes. It's the finals of the 100 freestyle. Top 8 swimmers in the entire nation. And you have a 6'4" man in a women's swimsuit with a bulge next to a woman wearing only a Speedo with nothing covering her top.
Oh no.
Again.
Oh no.
If your initial reaction is to laugh, that's because it's like an SNL skit, or like a Babylon Bee headline, or like a South Park episode. But it's reality. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, no, it's me. I'm the crazy one. It must be. Like, this is the Twilight Zone. Izzy, now Isaac, ended up placing 5th in the nation, which is an incredible achievement, to be top 5 in the entire country. Now she is competing with the men. Finishes dead last every single time. The only male, and again, I don't say this to make a mockery or to poke fun, because it's literally reality. The only male, or the only meet I watched of hers this year, the only man she beat was a man who had 1 arm. I say that to say, if we were really basing this off gender identity, like the NCAA claim, like the Biden administration claims, like the IOC claims, then why did we have someone identifying as a man competing with the women?
Yeah.
It's of course a rhetorical question, because again, anyone with a brain or a heart for that matter could answer this. Izzy, now Isaac, could never, would never, and will never be able to compete at the same level against the men. Anyways, back to the silencing aspect piece of this. We were told, you'll never get a job. Your employer will look up your name and see that you're a transphobe. And you don't want that, do you? You'll never get into grad school. You'll lose your friends. You'll lose your scholarship and your playing time. They said, Riley, remember you signed that scholarship. And when you signed that scholarship, you gave away your rights to speak in your own personal capacity. You represent us. Remember whose name is across your chest and across your cap, because it's not your own, it's ours, and understand we've already taken your stance for you. Thomas's teammates, 16 of those girls, plus their parents, signed on to an email at the beginning of the season expressing their discomfort in the locker room to the administration. And I kid you not, I have a screenshot of their response. UPenn responded back with, if you, as women, feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia, here are some counseling resources that you should seek in an attempt to re-educate yourselves. They even went as far to tell these girls that if you do speak out, and any harm whatsoever comes towards Thomas's way, whether that's physical, emotional, through social media, self-inflicted for that matter, any harm comes towards his way that, well, they said her way, any harm comes towards her way, then you are solely responsible. And that would make you responsible for a potential death. And you don't want to be a murderer, do you? So I suggest you be kind, and I suggest you be inclusive. Let that really sink in for a second. And this is why I say it's emotional blackmail. Because they told girls as 17, 18, 20-year-old girls that they would be, it's equivalent to having blood on your hands, is what they told them, if you advocate for fair play and privacy in areas of undressing. But believe it or not, it's effective. That works. So anyways, I hear all the time, where are the other women? Gosh, we are here, but they're terrified. There are so many more of me than we realize. Anyways, in short, believe it or not, that's the in short version. I could stand up here forever, really, truly hours, and list all of the different pieces and moving parts of this. But in short, that's the how I got here. But I think more importantly than the how is the why. Why is this happening, first and foremost? Why do we care so much? Do I so fiercely and so passionately want to defend this topic? First of all, answering the question of why is this happening, I feel very confident in answering this, because I'm a Christian, and the Bible tells us why this is happening. Because Paul warns us several times throughout in Acts and Romans and different places. He tells us that we will reach a point where these spiritual battles intensify, and dark will be seen as light, and bitter will be seen as sweet, and evil will be seen as immoral. It's undeniable that that's not what we're seeing now. And look, that's not me calling trans people or people who identify as trans evil. No, I don't think they're evil. But I do think deception is evil, and I do think manipulation is evil, and I do think that lying and affirming delusions is evil. And who moves through deceit? and who moves through lies and temptation. Satan does. So I guess from a worldly perspective, why do I care so much? Make no mistake, this is so much broader than just women's sports. The premise of this is that we are denying objective, not just biblical truth, objective truth, biological reality we're being asked to deny. And the most basic of truths at that, man and woman. The sheer essence of humanity, hate to break it to every single person in this room, you're all here from man and woman, and we're being asked to deny that. That's as if we're being asked to deny that the sky is blue, or being told to say 2 + 2 is 5. And we've already heard from She, which I'm like such a huge fan. I can't wait to talk to you after this. We've heard what happens when we start to say 2 + 2 is 5. Talk to someone like She from China, or North Korea, or Russia, or Germany, or Cuba, or Brazil, or Venezuela, or any of these countries that have once embraced this communist, Marxist, socialist regime. And they will tell you it's a slippery slope. And it's a slippery slope that by the hands and feet of our own leaders, we are actively being led down. If you look at the different pieces of it, which have already been outlined so perfectly, but really, to again put it in front of you, the denial of truth, not to mention the shift in language. Have you noticed it's no longer woman or mother? In California, just a week or two ago, they introduced a bill that would change the word female in state statute to person. It's now cervix haver, or uterus owner, or menstruator, or bleeder, or chest feeder, or birthing person, or whatever other derogatory term they can come up with that reduces women down to their biological functions and capacities. I noticed they're not doing it to men. Could you imagine if we started calling men sperm producers? Or excuse me for being explicit, sorry, but erection havers? Men would not put up with this for 1 second. But we as women, we're clapping and cheering it as it goes on. Anyways, and this idea, I have such a problem with it. When people say biological woman, I did this at first. I thought it was necessary to make the distinction. Look, I'm a biological female. Thomas is a biological male. I took a lot of upper level math courses in college for my major. And so I'm sitting there one day and I'm like, if this was an algebra equation, I think that word biological would just cancel out. Why are we saying that? I'm like, why are we saying that? And I finally understood then. We're playing their game. We are conceding when we say that. Because understand, when you add that prefix, that prerequisite of biological, you are subconsciously, even if you don't realize it, you are subconsciously admitting that there's an unbiological alternative to being a woman, or a man, or a girl, or a boy, or a male, or a female, and there's not. Again, God created the distinction that we needed when He made man and woman. Even this verbiage of sex reassignment surgery. Be so cautious. It sounds harmless, but when you say it, you are subconsciously admitting that you can reassign your sex. You cannot. There is no amount of hormones, there's no amount of surgery or anything that you can do that would change you down to a chromosomal level. It's all cosmetic at this point. And this verbiage of gender-affirming care, it sounds so positive, doesn't it? Think about the message that is sending. Gender-affirming care. We are telling, whether it's kids or adults for this matter, we are telling these people who are deceived and struggling, who are victims themselves a lot of the times, we are telling them that they are correct to feel as if they were born in the wrong body. Which, what a terrible message to send to anyone. We should be telling them that God made them perfect the way that they are. So be mindful of the words that we use, because it really does matter. Clear language is what we need. People are hungry for clear language. I get so frustrated when I see someone like Fox even participating. I'm like, stop it. Stop doing that. So be mindful. So again, to just put the pieces here. The denial of truth, the shift in language, the breakdown of faith. We used to be a country that proudly said, "In God we trust," or "one nation under God." the breakdown of families, the nuclear family, and really pinning parents and kids against each other. The breakdown of our freedoms, such as the freedom of speech. A lot more of those freedoms are being broken down here in the state of California. The propaganda that's being spread through the media, the preying on the most vulnerable, that being children and women, it only points in one direction. It's the same direction that she talked about, that we've heard many times in this room today. To briefly mention the impact that's been had, and I'll just say, all that sounds very grim, and it sounds very chilling, and again, from a worldly perspective, it is chilling. I'm not worried long term, because we know the outcome, because again, the Bible tells us the outcome. We know who wins the war, or really who has already won the war, which is why I'm able to do this with a smile on my face and stay completely grounded and an incredibly light heart. But to mention the impact that's been had, despite all of the negative that we do see, there has been a lot of traction and a lot of momentum these past couple years. 24 states have now passed some sort of fairness in women's sports bill, which is huge considering just 3 years ago only one state had. You're clapping too soon because California has a long way to go. 4 states now have a law very opposite to the one that California, I mentioned a few minutes ago, have just recently introduced. A law that defines the word woman, which I can't believe we even have to define the word woman in law. But we have a sitting Supreme Court justice who can't even do such because she claims she's not a biologist. Well, guess what? I'm not a veterinarian, but I know what a dog is. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It is necessary that we define the word woman. And I would argue that it's urgent we do so. So that's been passed in Tennessee, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska. Many more states on the docket. I think it's tracking at about 13 different states right now. So lots of good work there. At the federal level, I mentioned Title IX, right? It's the federal civil rights law that prevents discrimination against or on the basis of sex. Now, the people in the White House have actively rewritten it. I believe it'll be implemented in the next week, 2 weeks. Where they're equating sex with gender identity. Meaning, in a nutshell here, because it's a lot broader than just women's sports, men can join sororities, which is already happening. Men would have full access to bathrooms, locker rooms, changing spaces on campuses. Men could take academic and athletic scholarships away from women. Men would be randomly housed in dorm rooms with women. And if you, a 17-year-old girl who's given this man as your roommate, if you go to your administration and express your discomfort and ask for a new roommate, then you, under this new rewrite, are guilty and charged with sexual harassment. Not the man parading around your locker room. No, that's brave and stunning and inspiring and whatever other virtuous word they can use. But you calling a spade is grounds for sexual harassment. But there's lots of work being done to combat this. Lawsuits will drop. There's a couple ways this can be handled. Of course, in courts, which will be pursued, but it's a lengthy process, and Congress has the opportunity to introduce a Congressional Review Act, which we're working on getting done when all of this happens. So good stuff is happening. Yeah, it's wild. But what we can do, I hear it all the time. I'm just one person. One person living in the state of California, you know, there's nothing that we can do to help this. That would be your first mistake, believing that, because there is. First and foremost, I think the most powerful way to make impact as consumers, as everyday Americans, parents, is one, to stop giving your money to organizations who hate you, quite frankly. This movement is very much driven by dollar signs. It doesn't follow red or blue, it follows green, right? You look at someone like Bud Light, the most renowned example of this, who essentially lost $27 billion overnight. You know what their next commercial was? A big burly man on a motorcycle with a camo can. We the people have the power to make change. That's with our pockets, with our dollars. Hit them where it hurts, and that's their pockets. And that being said, it's important to invest in organizations who do love you, and who do care about you, and whose values match your own. Supporting groups like this one, like Moms for America, a lot of the groups that are here in this room today, it's crucial to support them. The people who are actually on the ground doing the work. Look, I know not everyone can run for school board, or not everyone can run for an elected position, but we should support our people who can and who do, especially in the state of California. So, dollars are important. Secondly, we need parents, to be totally frank with you. We've seen this big push from moms. I feel like as the past 5 years or so, we've seen a lot of moms running for school boards, and I feel like we've woken up a lot of mad mama bears, which in my experience, there's literally nothing scarier than that. I could not be more grateful for the beginning portion of this series, the attack on men, the war on men, and garnering and hoping to wake up these men. I think that's why, admittedly, truthfully, I think that's why our nation is failing, because of weak male leadership across the board. Not even just, whether that's in academia, whether that's in corporate America, whether that's within our government, our media, our spiritual leaders even, we are seeing weak men. And there's a saying, it's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And it's this cycle, and it repeats itself. And you can see this process play out through any civilization, the rise and fall of, not just here in the US, but I think the last time we had a society full of strong men here in the US was in the 1940s, during World War II, the self-proclaimed greatest generation. Think about it, these were men who were actively lying about their age, saying they were older than what they really were so they could enlist and fight for this country. And now, 80-ish years later, you have men actively lying about their sex so they can get into women's sports or women's prisons or women's locker rooms or whatever else. It's a telltale sign of where we are now. So we talk a lot about, girls and women, and we ask ourselves the question of where are the feminists, which, don't even get me started on that question. But I think just as often as we ask ourselves the question of where are the feminists, we should be asking ourselves the question of where are the men. That being said, parents, defend your daughters, but teach your sons how to be strong men, masculine men, because we need strong men. Third, trust God's calling for you. For the longest time, I thought, this is not for me. I didn't understand anything about our government. I never had to take, and this is kind of scary looking back, I didn't have to take a government course at any point in my life. I think I took history in 9th grade. I knew nothing about our civil process or civics in general. I knew we had 3 branches of government. I didn't know what they did. I still don't really know what they do. I don't even think they know what they do, to be totally frank with you. Had to take a public speaking course in college. My face turned the color of a tomato. I did not feel prepared for this. But I understood that I understood this pretty quickly, honestly. God doesn't call the equipped, He equips the called. And if He brings you to it, He will bring you through it. Just as He did with Moses, who led the Israelites out with Aaron and his staff. And just as He did with Joshua, who He promised a victory over the Canaanites. And just as He did with Esther, before she was brought before the king. Speaking of Esther, that verse, everyone knows the last little bit, for such a time as this, but I think we forget the front half of that verse, because it says, for if you remain silent, you and your father's family will perish for such a time as this. That speaks to everyone. If you are silent, understand silence is complicity. If you are not condemning something, you are condoning something, and you're just as bad as the people who created or enforced these lunatics who have enforced these regulations or rules or guidelines. It's our job to call out the hypocrisy, to hold their feet to the fire. It's our job. One more point, I just thought of this actually, in California. We talk a lot about the sports realm, again, much broader than that. And prisons. There have been over 1,600 men in recent weeks applied to be in women's prisons, just in the state of California. And these are men who are convicted sex offenders or other heinous crimes like kidnapping or child pornography. And they're getting into women's prisons. And they're impregnating women. It's happening in New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Kansas, of course in California. In New York, they have posted placards in their all women's facilities about pregnancy prevention. And you know what they did just a couple weeks ago during the Super Bowl, actually on Super Bowl Sunday in the state of California? These, whoever, I guess, officers, whoever it was, worked overtime. They got overtime hours and they came in when no one was looking, everyone's distracted with the Super Bowl. And in women's facilities in California, they put in condom dispensers and dental dams in all women's facilities. Now, why would they need condom dispensers? Not only, first of all, sexual activity or intercourse is not allowed in prisons, but by putting these condoms in there, not only are they allowing it, they're essentially encouraging it. That's right here, guys. I could list a bajillion examples in California. Anyways, all of that to say, it's up to us. We have to fight. It's my future that's at stake. A lot of you guys will be long gone by then, but I won't be. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. But really, it is your kids' future, your grandkids' future, and still your future. So that's why we fight. Again, could not be more grateful to be here, to be in the room with amazing people like she. I mean, it's just truly incredible. And for you all to be here. Is it up for a couple of questions? Is that allowed?
I just wanted to tell you something. On EWTN, they had a doctor on, and he said those that were transitioned could not feel sexual pleasure ever again. I don't know if that's true or not.
Hold on. Let's take 2 questions, but they've got to be actual questions, and then we'll just wrap it up.
Cool.
Yeah, make it super quick, just a quick
So
question.
you talked about the why, which is so important, and I feel that. So the question is a 2-part question. If Donald Trump were to ask you to take a key role in this administration, how would you respond to that? And the second part of the question is, what's next for you?
Gosh, I feel like I still have sanity, so any elected position is, or appointed position, man, I've just really seen how corrupt politics really is.
So what's next for you?
So what's next for me? Man, I'm really trusting God's calling, to be totally honest with you. Like I said, trying to make plans, I realize that's the quickest way for him to just laugh in your face. I've written a book, which was super fun. As I mentioned, this was the very much in short version, and it is up for pre-sale now. It's called Swimming Against the Current, Fighting for Common Sense in a World That's Lost Its Mind, on Amazon and stuff, but it comes out in May. A big push of what I'm doing right now, of course I work a lot in states and a lot of activism, which I was very hesitant to call myself an activist because I pictured someone with blue hair who was screeching, but I am an activist, and honestly, like, we need more activists on our side, so I'm very proud to call myself an activist. So I do a lot of lobbying, essentially, and teaching lawmakers how to talk about these issues and feeding questions to members of Congress and different things. Speaking on college campuses is still a big push, engaging people my age, because again, ultimately, it's our future. So that's what I've kind of been up to. Super fun stuff. Yes?
Have you been contacted by any of the women that really pushed Title IX through, i.e. Billie Jean King, Ann Myers, any of the predominant, athletes of the time in the 70s, which I was a part of? I've been reaching out and nobody wants to email me back. And I'm like...
The only person who was really